Ready? Okay. We will call the special city council meeting for Tuesday, June 13th to order. First item on the agenda is B, City of Nisswa 2024 budget, department budget requests. Jenny, do you want to kick it off?
I sure can do that. Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, members of the council. Tonight, we kick off our first official discussion about the 2024 budget. In your packet, there are a handful of items that are a follow-up from the council retreat, kind of itemizing every department's presentation and the information that you received back in April. I have a memo that's very high level on just some of the components of that spreadsheet information that you have. I have some information on the priorities from the Employee Retention Committee for your information. And some information on our citywide projects, an update for you, and some questions and feedback that I will ask from the council later in the discussion. But for now, I think really items B and C, it's really all one big conversation. I think that it would be helpful to go through the new items list and talk about council's goals and priorities for next year. And so I figured we would just have that opportunity to kind of open up the conversation. I did provide to you, I have it on the screen as well. There's copies up at the podium for the audience if they'd like a sheet. I just provided our levy history. It's always a useful reference for the council. We like to have every year as part of these conversations. And then I did include an update on the CPI index. The May number came out today at 3.7. So I wanted to provide that to the council as well. It's not the font on the screen for this new items list isn't too large, but we certainly can go through items and talk about that.
Yep.
I'm hoping tonight that we'll have some sense from the council on even a few things. If there's a few things we definitely want to incorporate, things we don't want to incorporate, or if we need to help provide some more context to you, that would be helpful as well. And really, I'm here to answer questions and give you guidance or feedback. If you have budget number questions or things like that, I can help. But it's really for your discussion, sort of feedback to staff from the retreat. They would certainly like as much input and feedback you have for them as you have been thinking about it probably off and on over the last few months. So with that, I will turn it back over to you, Mayor Ryan.
Okay. So how do we want to kick this off, guys? Do we want to go through and list priorities that council members have, or do you want us to take it line by line? What do we want to do? Anybody have a preference?
Just go line by line.
Okay. So we're looking for 2024 priorities, things where we're at. City Hall improvements. I think we, from the discussions we've had, or go ahead.
I could, it's one of those ones I was going to discuss later, but it's not a problem. We can talk about it now. I am working with WIDSETH as we've narrowed down the scope and we've received some feedback from council. I'm working with them to try to prioritize that a little bit further for the council, because we still need to address some of the structural issues and things with the building. So I'm hoping to have that information to you probably next month. So whether it's, I think the scope of that project would likely mean we would be talking about a bond, maybe in conjunction with some other projects as well, but not necessarily a specific budget line item for 2024 outside of debt service. So
With that scope though, is just, we had talked about just repairs and structural improvements, windows, roof, doors, that sort of stuff. We're not talking about remodeling anything at this time, correct? Correct. Yeah.
well, you did ask for staff feedback, and so I did go through that, and then that is what I'm working with WIDSETH to see. I do think that there are some things, I mean, even maybe you're not talking remodel as far as we need new countertops and things like that. Maybe that's not what you mean by remodel, but some of those components we certainly do need to address in the building. So that's what I'm trying to work through to make sure we are adequately.
I know we did talk about making the area flow better, so that there was, I know that came up. That's the stuff you're just talking through with them. Okay. but it's gonna be a bond issue as opposed to I mean, it's not like we're budgeting the whole thing type deal. We're gonna end up having, because we know it's gonna be probably a few bucks, especially the roof.
Yep.
Right, but you know,
So,
like if
but-
a countertop or a desk needs replaced, but we're not talking about moving interior walls, office spaces, stuff like that.
I don't really think we are. I mean,
No,
no,
we all.
Well,
agree.
Yep.
Right, right.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yep.
okay, I see. No.
Yep.
So, so then we're down, I guess, community center stuff, the community center. Various building improvements, tables, chairs, bathroom, carpet, staining. I'm assuming that's the exterior.
And this is part of our capital improvement plan. I think this is a continuation from what we've been doing. So this isn't, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is not a new 20,000. I mean, this is part of the capital improvement plan budget we have, but we do include it because there's still items
Right.
we're working on, and we try to grow it every year to some extent. So
Yeah,
The
and that's-
Lucas device, that was something that you guys.
Well, let's back up to the community center. I have a question. What's our rental rate and how is that reflected with this too? Do we have a copy of that or know what that is? The rental rate on the community center?
I'm going to defer to Amber.
Yeah, we do have various rates depending on if it's a larger group or a smaller group, nonprofits, things like that. We did assess it in 2021 and updated our rates at that time. And so it's something that we've traditionally done in the fall to adopt the next year. So it was implemented in 2022. And so we have actually been having a couple of really good years. We weren't totally sure coming out of the pandemic, what it would look like, and it's tracking ahead of what we've budgeted.
Okay, yeah, so let's, as we look with this, if we can have the rental rate prices a part of that discussion as we move ahead, so we can kind of see how the overhead compares to how we're increasing that, keeping track.
Okay.
If that makes sense to everybody.
Fire department, Luke, the call rate was that was already implemented. The Lucas device. The last conversation I had with Sean, you guys were
That's,
looking at a grant or
yeah, looking at a grant or fundraising, there might possibly be a couple people that would donate to that too, but the purpose of that is gonna go in that new truck when that truck shows up.
so you'll have
So we have two of them in
two
the chief's
squad,
vehicle.
two rescue squads,
Yep.
basically, yeah.
Was it, I don't know if member is preceding me, but was it originally purchasing a used one?
That's the price of a new one.
Okay, I thought
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
all
And the last one, I believe the Lions donated the last one
right.
to
I
us.
think you're right. Yeah, okay. Good with that. Parks?
Yep, parks, this is all part of the overall parks plan, correct? What's listed in here? Okay, but we do know that the Camp Lincoln Park updates, don't we have to have those done this year?
End of
2024?
next year, 24.
End of 24.
Yep.
They have to be
Yep.
done by.
Yep.
Okay,
So this has to be budgeted.
so where are we at with the archaeological stuff? Do we know?
We're working on a lot of varying components on how that
Got a smile on her
works together.
face.
Yeah,
It's-
like Amber.
It'll all be coming out in your city council packet for next week. So I do have that information on what the archaeological study will cost. High end, if they don't find anything, it's just over 6,000 to do the study. And then you have to give the archaeologist parameters in which for them to do their search within. And so instead of doing the whole 5 acres, we kind of figured out roughly like 1.5 acres to assess. And so what would be helpful with that is then for us to shoot a center line for them to work off of. So next week, you'll see the cost for the archaeological study as well as some engineering, just to kind of shoot a line for the archaeologist to work off of and give them some parameters within the parcel for the infrastructure.
And if
So
that all went forward, may hope it, so to speak, how long will it take him to do?
Engineering, shooting that line is a matter of a couple of days. The archaeological study, if you just want to do the parking lot and road area, that's a day. If we were to include some of the trail area, that would be probably 2 or 3 days. And then it's actually the report writing that takes several weeks.
Okay.
So we've kind of tried to give the time frame to the archaeologists that we'd like to have the report done by end of year.
But the bathroom, road, parking lot, that's part we gotta get done by the end of next year.
Next year.
Now, are you just talking about? Are you just talking about SHPO or TIPO as well? With the archaeologists?
We've have contacted 3 different state agencies and they all recommended doing a phase 1 archaeological study.
To do that first?
Yep, you do
Okay.
that first. So from that, we've contacted the same company who did it for the Gull Lake Trail, and that's who I have a quote from. And so we had both the archaeologist and Woodseth break it out into 2 options. One being just the road and the parking lot bathroom area, and then the second to include the trails.
So can this place that did the Gull Lake Trail, they are native or no?
No, they're an archaeologist.
Archaeologists. So will that be acceptable with TIPO?
Yep, so and one of the questions she asked is if the study needs to be observed.
Uh-huh.
And so that's what we'll have to kind of determine as well.
Have you gotten any feedback yet from Leech Lake? TIPO?
No.
Yeah.
A lot of times they won't get involved unless the firm finds something. Then they really get involved.
Okay.
And based on timing of this, if we're able to get this moving this year, we do have some money that we've been setting aside for Camp Lincoln that we could use towards these studies and this work that needs to be done. So this is we're just trying to potential if there is something that we need to deal with in 2024. But the goal would be hopefully to get this moving this year and get the reports done and all of that, so we can then construct next year.
So we still have all the costs of the engineering and then the infrastructure to put in next year.
Have you, I know this is a sort of an off the wall one, but have you asked at all about just overlaying, not disturbing anything at all?
We have not at this point. I was hoping to bring this information to you and that being part of the discussion. I know that was not an option with the Gull Lake Trail. We proposed a boardwalk over the top and that was not permitted. And so it's certainly something that we could look into. But I just know for the Gull Lake Trail, it wasn't allowable. So still kind of running down
Yeah, right
both
now.
paths right
And
now.
that's fine.
Mhm.
But I'm just thinking, we might want to be more forceful. I mean, the person I'm working with says you can do this and it was done at another place.
Sure.
So we should be able to copy that. This is his opinion anyway.
So how much about, I'm looking at the first 4 numbers there. Is a, rough expense of what we're looking at. That would have to be a budgeted amount then minus what we've put together. Or
I would say the first 2 are going to be the major components for next year.
Okay.
Likely we will have fun if we can get the studies moving forward. We'll have the funds this year for that portion.
Okay.
But the first 2 would be the components for next year's budget.
Okay.
And whether that comes from unallocated reserve
unallocated,
or,
yeah, it doesn't have
or
to
you
be
can-
levied.
right, or
necessarily.
some component of that
Okay.
or variation. Yeah.
And I
Joe?
look at,
Yeah, are you done, John?
yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
The employees component to all this with all your stuff, we need to talk about that and you can do a lot, but you can't do everything, especially adding a new park and taking care of all this stuff. And so do you have specific thoughts on employees, whether it be out in the field or in the office, or have kind of a thought process in your mind as the park and rec area develop on what would be first needed for help?
Yeah, so first infrastructure that's being added is the Gullwig Trail this summer. And we've kind of talked with Public Works and Parks, and we want to test it out with the seasonal staff that Public Works already has. Everybody believes that we currently have enough availability between everyone's schedules to assess what the trail maintenance needs are gonna be next year in terms of mowing or clearing and things like that. And so I think next year, at least for the trail, we want to just give it a trial run with kind of what we've had with status quo of seasonal employees. That's next year would be the construction of Camp Lincoln. So in 2025, then we would have the both new infrastructure in. And so I'm thinking more like 2025. There's certainly things that are going undone right now. A lot of it is more so with weeding, and the addition of the third seasonal staff has certainly been helpful to deal with that for parks. But there's definitely more upkeep that could happen, or projects and things like that. But I'm targeting more about 2025 as we see how City Park pans out, and then we get both the trail and the Camp Lincoln in. And then we'll know what we're dealing with a little bit better and what our needs will be for equipment and people.
Okay. The rest of the items there on the park, we're kind of looking at, which is part of the overall park plan. And I believe we're going to be discussing, or have discussed, about a 0.5 cent sales tax to try and fund park.
Well, we can, if
You know,
that's
I mean,
helpful, you want to talk about that now, since we're talking about parks, or,
Moratorium on
right?
more sales tax.
So for 2024, I believe it's a 2-year, but we'll just say essentially for the upcoming year, 2024, legislature has agreed that there will be no local sales tax requests. There is a sales tax task force that has been authorized, and I will be on it as an appointee from the league and representative of the city of Nisswa. So I will get to be involved in those discussions, which would be great, because this is very important to us to know how this will shape going forward. Amber and I have been talking about how we work towards now addressing what will be a time lag. Now, that was presuming we would get the sales tax on the first try, which doesn't always happen anyways. But we do need to bring to the council some information about the things that we may need to address as far as infrastructure, and things that may need to come out or be removed, mostly with respect to the rink for safety purposes. So the plan was to do that in July, potentially having a workshop before the regular meeting, or some, just efficient time to have a conversation about that, because we want to stay ahead of those conversations and give people time to think about the implications. Likely because we don't have another lever for funding opportunity unless the council wants to invest funds into what potentially is a short-term solution before we would implement, say, the full Parks Master Plan for all of those components. So we do have kind of a hold. I did have a Zoom call today also with the University of Minnesota Extension. They do provide sales tax analysis for cities, and they are going to provide me a high-level summary report at no cost, just to see what our retail numbers are at and some information that they look at. So they're requesting that information from the Department of Revenue. They'll put that together. So we'll have a sense for what that will look like for us. And then when and if the conversation comes back around with the legislature, we would have more information to be able to move on that. So they will help us with that information as well.
So let's say the sales tax does not go through,
Yeah.
And I think that it's a more complex issue than just saying we're gonna raise the sales tax. I think there's a lot that goes into that, and
Yeah.
discussion, and
Yeah.
obviously, with the people in Nisswa too, as myself, I'm not sure that that's the right answer. what are our other options for specifically funding park project like this from the state? You know, are there different grants out there? Is there federal monies? You know, what are other options being explored?
Well, other options and other options being explored to different questions. Of course, we have our levy. We can bond, we can ask for donations, we can seek grants at the state or federal level. There are hundreds of grants, just broadly speaking, from infrastructure to roads to parks to water, wastewater. I mean, there's a range, certainly. There's only so many there's only so much time you can spend doing that at one time. Quite honestly, Camp Lincoln and the Gull Lake Trail have taken priority, but we certainly want to figure out how to bring the parks plan, forward in the next year or so, and how do we address that?
So I guess maybe a more direct question, is there a financial plan or directive laid out on how to seek this out and go about doing it? Like, is there, what's out there, like you said, is two different questions and what's actively being done. So do we actively have a plan in place for people or seeking out grants, fundraising, this sort of stuff? It seems like that would be our first goal, to kind of sit down and figure out that strategy on how we're going to tackle this first. And I guess, yeah, I don't know if that's on topic, off topic, but that's the way I'd see this is, what is our financial strategy plan to go after it?
No, it's a great question. And certainly Amber, I think, would appreciate some direction as far as how we want to invest our time. We can only put so much time, and I'll say very little, into active fundraising. The idea with creating the fund was that we would have a place for people to go, but we can't spend a lot of time doing that from a staff perspective. Maybe there's other ways to get creative with that, but from a staff perspective, there's limitations there. But grant writing and other things, certainly that has been the default for parks, to be quite honest, is go find a grant or go get a donation. And that's difficult to sustain from any department, really. But if there are avenues the council wants us to focus on, that's helpful to know.
Yeah, so I'm wondering, like grants, who would be the, is that something that you do, Jenny? Is it something that Amber does? Is it something that we hire an outside party? Who is researching the grants, or who does that for us?
I'll say historically, it's primarily the parks director who's done it in the past. They've outsourced one time, to my knowledge, in recent history for grant writing services. But yes, there are certain grants that are much more prevalent and better fits that we've had our eyes on. Typically grants need matching dollars. So as part of the discussion, whether it's something that we're kind of putting money away for, if it's coming out of reserve fund, unallocated, if it's levy, if it's donation. I think it's a combination of all sorts of avenues right now. And so if there's a definitive way that we do or do not want to go about it, that would be helpful. But as of right now, like all the grants, fundraising, those are all typical avenues we've done and will continue to pursue on some level.
So kind of back to the employee question, full circle, then do you feel like on a project this big that you have enough time to do this, or would this be one of the things that you'd say, hey, maybe I'd want some help with this?
I think contracting some of these services would be helpful in terms of grant writing. Sometimes the smaller grants are pretty easy to write the narrative. But every grant is a little bit different in the requirements they have and where you need to be within the project, and budgeting information, engineering information. Every grant has its nuance. Larger grants certainly have much more detail that you need to provide. And in those cases, having support would be very helpful.
Doesn't Paula West have some background in the grants and stuff through the parks or not?
She does have some grant writing experience, yes.
Okay, and I mean, that would be a benefit too.
Yep, and she's in the past offered to proofread and provide feedback.
Okay, I think it would be important with this, heading into this phase, if we can get her to get more involved, to take some of that off of your plate, and I don't know if she'd be up to that or not, but.
And I think it's certainly something of consideration if a person wants to volunteer to do that, or if we need to pay and hire those services out. WIDSEF has people that do that. We hired Kathy Moore to do the first round of legacy funding for the Gull Lake Trail. So there's definitely people within the community that are invested in trying to see these positive changes happen and want to provide those services. And certainly it does take a substantial amount of my time, and then other things, you know, such as programming, that stuff doesn't go away. So I just try and find a way as best I can to get it all done, knowing that this too shall pass.
I think Joe and I are on the same page, is we need to start looking at outside help to do it, or, you know, I may approach Paula that way.
I would agree.
Yeah.
I certainly,
So what does that run? Can we find out, you know, what should?
depends on the grant.
Yeah, so, okay,
The source will take a certain fee for each grant that's received for assistance in grant writing. Is that source?
They don't provide grant writing assistance.
Sourcewell does not?
No.
No,
No. Do we have any other organizations that we're familiar working with that can provide that service?
I'm sure there are beyond WIDSEF and Kathy Moore. That's just local,
BLEDC, wouldn't they?
I would think that it would be in
possibly Blade, yeah.
to our benefit to get an idea of what, because I think that's something that we're gonna need to include in that 2024 budget for parks
Right. Yeah.
to do that.
Sure.
And if it's a one-off and it's not that much, that's one thing, but if it's something that without the personnel, additional help and stuff, then you know, now your plate, obviously the trail will be done, but you're still gonna have a lot of work going on, like you
Oh, yeah.
said, with the maintenance and everything else. What are we looking at? So if we get somebody else to do the grant work for especially the park, the main parts of it, the big parts.
And as like Amber was saying, with some of those, they're so involved, you may have to have some engineering done first, and you know, how much, you know, knowing the cost and your budgets. I mean, that gets, so, yes. I wish we
That's
could just
helpful. Thank you.
wave a wand and have somebody do it. Because I mean, your time, you have so much. I mean, we're just bogging you down. I mean, why aren't you pulling your hair out?
It's just going gray.
Okay, so
Yes.
we'll just kinda
Just
need
going
that
gray
number.
instead.
Need that information.
Yeah, so I mean,
So,
Yep,
that's what,
we can,
yeah.
yeah, we'll work to include something for that and
Okay,
incorporate that. Yes, can do. Thank you.
So is that gonna be conclusive for all Parks and Rec items? Because there's obviously a larger figure in regard to the park engineering for the Parks Master Plan.
yeah.
park master plan total was what,
720.
724.
And I just listed all the things that she had discussed. So I think we've covered.
Yeah.
Broadly, I mean, we're not talking about the engineering for the Parks Master Plan at this point. But I just listed everything that was discussed. So,
That's the other thing too, is we can't. When we come to the engineering, can that be piecemealed? Meaning, instead of having the whole park engineered at one time, can that be set up to like, okay, this is kind of where we want the playground, this is where we want this, can they kind of do little bits at a time, or is it best or cost effective to do it all at once? What's your opinion on that?
I think, well, I'm not an engineer, and I've had one conversation with Joe about this. So he says, obviously right now, everything's very conceptual. Right, so we have to get to a point to see what's even feasible and kind of moving forward from that. So in terms of phasing things, I think that's something that we're definitely looking at as an option for how to move forward with it. I would want to consider at least preliminarily, the park as a whole, just to make sure that things are being planned within the space we have. But yes, once you go past like a basic preliminary and you start doing final engineering, as we've discussed, we don't want to do that until we're knowing that we have the funds and we're ready for that component of the park.
Well,
If
it's
that
like-
answers your question.
With just a $7.4 million project, I think it would be best off for the city. I know we got WSM, but I think that would be a bid thing. Go out for bids
Mhm.
for engineering, because I do think I think we would be better served if if we could do the same company do all phases of it.
Mhm.
I don't know.
Yeah,
how-
sometimes there's pluses and minuses to that.
Yeah.
But, most definitely, it needs to be bid out and looked at, you know.
And all of that estimate is very preliminary off of HKGI's
Right.
rough
Yeah.
park total, and that's an 8% off of that. So until we really get into it, that's your best math equation kind of at this time, extremely high level, but
Yep.
it's not unfathomable for that to become reality either
Mhm.
at the cost of the park.
Better keep moving.
Planning and zoning. These are things that are this is well within the budgetary things that she's doing, so I don't. The police department. This is one thing that I did talk to Chief Taylor about in January, February. And I also talked to Chief Bailey of trying to combine this position for both departments. Chief Bailey at the time didn't think that that would be something that would be necessarily, but I know he said recently that, yeah, that would be something that could be used by the fire department. So I think having one office person to basically take care of all of both your emergency services departments is a good thing. And I think it's an easy sell to the public. Okay, because it's one person dealing with two things. Once that person gets up into speed with stuff, there'll be more work probably on the police department side at the beginning than there is going to be at the fire. But once that person's up to speed, they may even be able to help out the clerk's office with other stuff. But you're going to have one person managing the biggest benefit there is going to be, I still wish that we had numbers. We don't, for how much, roughly dollars and cents you'll save. Or what you're putting the officers back on the street. You're taking this workload off the office. This all equals money. And
We're just not gonna know until
well,
you probably go through the first calendar year of having. that
well,
ability,
right.
but Then how do you quantify it?
You can kind of figure it out, but the bottom line is it's time to do that, in my opinion. And get these guys back on the street and get it out there. Plus, you have county attorneys, city attorneys, state's attorneys that are calling. And it's nice to have one person to contact. There's people getting emails. They are not answering them. They're not getting them back to you. They come in 4 days later when they get off, they get, oh, damn, so this is one person, I think that I'm for it. I feel strongly in this one, and it's going to be a major bump to the levy. It's going to be roughly, 2.8%. But
Plus.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I just think that, some time should be taken, across the city to kind of, look at the full job description of that person and see how we could help all the departments. Yeah, because they said over there probably won't be a full-time job for the police.
I think they're going to find out, because we found out the same way and people out the hard way. It's a lot more work than they realized. And once that person's up and running, there's a lot of other stuff that they can take off the plates for the officers, the chief and everybody. And you can get busy really fast.
Sure.
So But yeah, I mean, there's that person's available to help out other things. Great. That absolutely.
Is this a proposed amount, including all insurance and benefits as well?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. I mean, it's an estimate, but
Yeah, just an
Yeah.
estimate, but yeah.
Is that something we want to look at starting now for them to go into start the hiring process? So that we
Not
can have,
start the hiring process, but I think we need to include it, whatever else is gonna be there. I think that needs to be part of the budget.
right.
That,
But if we look at, let's just say we decide, yes, that's, well, that won't be until later in the year anyway. So, okay, never mind.
is this something that I'm trying to gauge council interest, consensus?
I'm good with it.
Yes,
Okay, we'll include it in the budget.
Joe,
Yeah.
unanimous?
Thanks.
Public Works.
Public Works, do employee maintenance tech one. Is their top request, about the same as, same levy impact as the police department, so, you know, right there. The plow truck, that money's already there.
No, yes, no. I mean, it's part of our capital improvement plan. So in theory, we try to budget so that we have, if we go negative in a year, we're backfilling in the next year to replenish that fund. So I think this is trying to, with the lead time, trying to look ahead at, do we need to order sooner than anticipated? And knowing we're not going to get the vehicle, it's like our squad cars that we're still waiting for, you know, forever. So
As long as they're not going through
We don't
Ford, we
pay-
should be okay.
We don't pay for it till we receive it, though.
correct,
Yeah.
correct, yes. So that's certainly something we could, council could say, let's move forward with getting a quote and authorizing the ordering and things like that, just because of the lead time.
How much do we have in the fund currently?
That's the great question. I don't know off the top of my head. I'll try to look it up.
I'm looking at the entire list for Public Works. One thing that sticks out is the bottom new pivot and gravel for mini excavator. We actually just bought 3 of those, 3 for less than 45,000 total. I would ask for Tom to provide a quote just so I can understand what he's looking at. Maybe it's something a little bit more complicated. Just fairness in regards to the dollars. That seems like it's a bit excessive. Plow truck. Jenny, I might need just refreshment on this in regards to a larger capital purchase like this for this asset. What? It's not $300,000 in the calendar year of 24. Is it something that's going to be budgeted for through the course of multiple years? For a cycle process, right?
Well, no, so what we do is we try to average out the influx of money we need over, let's say, a 10-year period, so that some years we'll spend more and we'll spend it down, but other years we're not going to spend hardly anything, so we replenish the fund. So because the city has healthy reserves, we say we can sort of loan that fund a little bit of money for the years when we have to spend 300,000. Because then the next year, let's say the only request is a, $20,000 mower or something, so that we're backfilling. So that's kind of how we handle it, just because
Understood.
the range is so vast for public works equipment.
And we already have a bunch set aside for that.
Right.
We can follow up though on that pivoting grapple.
Yep.
Sure.
And that current truck is nickel and diamond them to death.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
That
Yep.
one
Yeah, the
they're
longer
looking
you
to
wait, the
replace.
more costs.
And it probably has at least an 18-month lead time. That's what garbage trucks are on, and it's basically the same. size.
Yes, so I'd say we'd want to move ahead to authorize them to.
I'm good
get
at,
ordered.
right. I'm good with all of them.
Long lead time.
I'm good with all of them. I just want to understand the cost for that grapple. Tom made his case at the council retreat in regards to additional staff support. He also brought it up to us at budget workshop in the fall. So,
One thing that, Mike Wagner is at a point in his career where he can retire. I don't know when he's going to or what his plans are. But there are a lot of little things. I found this out just working at Grandview. There are a lot of little idiosyncrasies with this sewer. And it would really be nice if Mike had somebody that was gonna take over for him, that could shadow him for a year. And I say a year because summer, winter, fall, spring, depending on the melt, depending on the freeze up, there's certain places on this system that are just plain interesting. And, Mike's forgot more about it than, and he was saying, he tries to write it down, he tries to keep a running tally, but we got more lift stations than Carter has liver pills, so it would be nice if somebody could literally shadow him and, basically use his knowledge to do that. I think we would be better served down the road with that. But then again, so that's talking to the staffing thing.
I think
I
there's
wonder-
opportunity. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mark.
I wonder if we have somebody already on board that could actually start doing that right away and then backfill that position.
That would be a Tom question, I guess.
A suggestion I would have is we can talk about sort of long-term structure of public works and wastewater. I would say potentially as we continue to include water in that future conversation, even though that's down the road, maybe looking at what does that structure look like and making sure we have people in the right places if and when we would have a retirement or some other change that we could bring something back to the council to
Mhm.
look at in more
Yeah.
depth, a little more specific.
I think it'd be good to ask and find out about that, especially to have someone that can start right away. Because we don't know what will happen.
Yeah.
And we could always then backfill that position. Second start it. It might be difficult to find somebody who can do it all at once.
Right.
Another point that he brought up that we maybe have forgotten is the sheer amount of overtime that he has factored into it. So let's just use the apples, half of 75,000, talking 37,500 in regards to additional overtime cost. I sure as heck would rather pay the additional 37,500 to get to that $75,000 benchmark, just to be able to have additional support when we do have an unforeseen event from how Tom brought up in regards to one of the public works employees taking time off due to a health reason. Something worse potentially in regards to
Oh, you never know.
long-term absence. So I give support for all these with the exception of statement I made about the grapple.
So we can bring a quote to the council in July for the plow truck.
Yep.
Work to incorporate equipment. And so, just to be clear, you want to include the employee in the next year's budget?
Yes.
So we'll have 2 new employees.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Is that unanimous?
Yeah. Yep, it is.
Okay, Employee Retention Committee. The health insurance contribution increase.
So if I can just, again, just being mindful of insurance, wages, all of these concepts and how they relate to negotiations. And you can certainly talk about what you want, just wanting to put it out there, wanted to give you reference to what these numbers or these ideas equate to in dollars, because that's helpful for budgeting. Certainly can answer questions, but just wanted to mention that, and I'll let you go from there.
What's the overall total percentage? Does anybody know?
Well, some of these things are, like, for example, longevity. I mean, there's 2 different scenarios provided for information, so I don't know that you would
Sure.
you would add all of that together.
Well,
Mark, didn't
I
you
mean,
say
when-
you ran
Yeah,
5.3 or
if
something?
we were to take it all as a whole, depending on the plan, you come out about 5.73% levy.
Well, but like Jenny's saying, that
We-
you could, if you're gonna figure that, you'd take your longevity, for example, there's 3
Right,
and three, they're both, they're night and day, so you just take the three highest. Or the, whatever you decide, but you would take those three and add it with the rest as opposed to. All of it, all 6 lines,
right.
so. and then,
Which works out to be about that 5.73.
7.3.
If you're looking at,
I'm sorry, I'm coming up with a different number.
no, the enterprise fund doesn't come out of the levy, correct?
Correct.
So that 0.54 isn't relevant. For example.
Yes, there's a
General-
few enterprise funds I put in there, so we're still looking at about.
I know that first line for the health insurance increase at 1.29 includes general fund and enterprise.
Right,
So it won't really be 1.29.
right. So then we're probably looking at 3.5 to 4.
And I think it's just to give you reference and also being mindful of, I mean, enterprise fund budgets need, you need to know what's going to be added to it if nothing else, but yes, levy and.
And some of this
Enterprise
is still
is different.
ongoing though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right. Am I close, Maggie?
I'm sorry. What did you say?
Well,
Never mind.
3.5 to 4.
6. Depending on which longevity for general fund. And that's at 1.29, which it won't be that.
That's it, yeah. 3 is probably a good round number for general fund for the first 2 items, the general wage adjustment and the first longevity as a reference.
it's hard to address the longevity issue without talking about through negotiations and that the negotiations and what's going on right now. So that's a question that I think the council should come up with where we want to go with wages, longevity, those kinds of things at our closed session. Be a better place for us to do that.
I
So-
agree. Table it until we have that
Yeah.
finalized and then we readjust it in July.
Sewer billing software, $20,000. The old software is no longer available. I hate to say it, it doesn't sound like we have much of a choice. Is this the software that's preferable or we're using already or we're?
It was just an estimate I threw out. I have
Okay.
4 softwares that I have information that maybe July I'll come to you with.
Okay, all right.
So,
But that
yes.
would cover any of the 4 that
Ye-
you're thinking of at this. point.
Yeah, and I'm guessing it's gonna be maybe closer to around 13,000.
Okay,
So
so
I will.
20
have-
will cover.
Yes.
Got it.
Yes.
Now, are you gonna need any more hardware
I don't think so.
with this? Okay, so
Nope.
all of our readers, all that stuff will continue to, okay.
Yep, that's my goal.
Mini excavator. I'm trying to understand, I thought we had a mini excavator.
They're trading it in.
So the mini excavator, say the grappler, they're gonna buy through the public works, but they'll use it with the mini excavator that the sewer fund is buying.
Mhm.
And does the sewer fund have the ability to do that?
Yes,
Okay.
Yep.
Well. And they want to trade up, right? They're just going to a bigger.
correct. Yes.
I don't know, I've never used mini excavators. They won't let me use them.
They're awesome. But it goes back to the point of that grapple being half the price of a replacement
Right.
before the trade-in. Which some doesn't look right to me.
Well, it doesn't look right.
The cost for that grapple.
Yeah, here,
I'm just
Yeah,
confused
that's
by it.
pretty expensive.
That's a lot.
excavator, that's about. It's been a long time since I've seen a quote on one.
It depends on what
What
make
brand?
model. Or
20s,
well, 27D would be That'd be a cap.
60D.
Yeah.
Cap.
Yeah.
Okay, so they're sticking with cap.
Ziegler cap.
All right.
The salesman will be at my golf tournament on the 30th. I'll make sure to find them and corner them for a good price.
There you go.
Good.
Okay.
Pickle.
Pickle Factory, building,
Yes.
revenue bond.
New building, I can provide a little bit. So I did update on that citywide project document as well. I was thinking about it. So we contract with PFM Financial Advisors to provide our sewer fund with cash flow analysis, financial analysis, and support in that way. And the sewer budget is roughly $900,000 a year. And when I think about the liquor fund, and we're at about 5.5 million between the two entities, and would it make just good sense regardless that we would also contract with PFM to do the same work and to provide that guidance to us, building or no building? I think that would maybe be something to consider as to work with. But with that, we would certainly ask for guidance on, debt service capacity for a new building or other components related to that, if we were to contract with them. So from the financial perspective, that's an annual cost of $6,500. We just have them on retainer and they provide that work for us each year. So that would be my recommendation from that side of things. I don't know that Terry has an update. He mentioned he needs to kind of get things going back on track as far as the building part of it and moving forward with those conversations. But I was trying to focus on what would be the options from the financial perspective to do that and to help provide us with some information and thinking about it comparative to the size of our sewer fund, and went, well, maybe we should be doing that anyways. So I open the idea up to you, the council, for feedback or other thoughts.
Have you spoken to Terry at all recently about it, Joe?
Well, yeah, and I guess, at the end of the day, where it's at with the pickle, the current bottom line, at the end of the day, doesn't justify running the business. We would be money ahead leasing that property out right now today to some other entity and be collecting a monthly rent payment off of it versus operating. I mean, that's just where we're at. Terry did just raise and adjust prices, here, I think about 3 weeks ago. And so we're in our first month of new prices, seeing how it's going to affect bottom line run numbers. And so when we had met last time with the liquor committee, it's like, okay, I guess my advice, and talking with everybody is, well, let's get the company, because that's what we're doing. We're running a business. Let's get the business as healthy as we can before we figure out how we're going to expand it, what we should expand, and do it, right now, just financially looking at it, it doesn't justify, or it would never pay for itself to put $2-3 million into a building. And so, with or without an outside analysis, I mean, the math is pretty basic on that it just doesn't justify itself right now. And so I guess that would be, that was my suggestion with Terry in the liquor committee. Like I say, he looked at it, evaluated it, did the price increase, and that's where we're kind of at. Now, that being said, yeah, the building something still needs done with the building, but just when and at what time, and how does that look? So.
My stance on Joe's points, I agree in regards to the operations side of the business, looking at the financials of the pickle alone. And just comps to even Nisswa, actually, with the exception of the Nisswa Legion. Full blown exception there. There is a lot of money that's left on the table there, just by memory, and maybe you can correct me, either of you two, if I'm wrong, but I believe it was almost just a 1% net profit off of revenues for the year 2022 from, I missed the last liquor committee meeting, but the one prior to that, we ran through them, and that's when the determination was made that yes, there needs to be a price increase. So to tandem Joe's point, I, for one, and am in favor of the city retaining the pickle. I understand of the cultural significance that the pickle has on long-term community members in this town. But on the flip side, the actual business operating health financially, there's a lot of room for improvement. I don't want to exactly use that as leverage for a new building, because I do understand that building has significant defects to it currently. It's in a state of decay, that's known. But it also has a significant stench in there in regards to the environment that we're asking city employees to be able to go work in day and day out. I think it's a ongoing discussion, but ultimately I am in full support of a revenue bond for the funding of that specific renovation of, not renovation, new pickle building, because I just have a very strong gut feeling that when we get down the path of, or the rabbit hole of renovating the pickle, it's going to turn into change order after change order, and we will be regretting that decision ultimately. That's where I'm at with it.
Why, here, I guess here's my question. Where have we not, as a council or as a city, have we failed to give the leadership at the pickle the training they need to successfully run the business? Or is there something else that we've missed that we haven't asked? I mean, if we're not asking.
At the end of the day, the councils failed Terry. Just like in a business, I'm an owner of business, Jesse's owner of business. We make those ultimate decisions. Terry's just a manager.
Right.
You know, and he's doing the best job he can, no fault to him, but at the end of the day, it hasn't been run like a business because the people in these chairs haven't made the decisions that they should as an owner to run it like a business. And that's, you know, looking back at it, you know, even with the price increases and stuff like that, and giving Terry the direction on what to go, just hasn't happened. I mean, that's just the truth of it.
And actually, even tandem off that, since Joe's been on council since at the start of the year, he's liquor liaison, liquor czar. Really, it's been a discussion with Terry, with Jenny too, that Terry actually just admitted, you know, historically, since he's been in that position at the pickle, whenever a price increase would take place at the pickle, they would work in tandem with the Legion, and they would have a comparable increase as well. Historically, we've never had a Main Street restaurant across the road from the pickle, right? Big Axe is still relatively new, and Rafferty's for a comparable, just in downtown business district, they're serving a few handful taps, and it's just a pizza joint. You don't go there for a beer normally, right? They've kind of had their own little, I'm not gonna call it a monopoly on their, you know, they're just, it's always been the hotspot, but ultimately at the end of the day, we have to ask ourselves this. And I think that's why Joe brings up the point. Why are we doing it if we're leaving that much money on the table? There's comparable, for us purchasing a bottle of Michelob Golden Light, Bud Light, etc. And for what we're selling it is almost like 250% less than what they're selling it for across the street at Spirits, or excuse me, at Main Street. So
Yeah, at
Well,
the end of the
I
day,
think as a council, I own a business too.
Great.
I think we should leave that up to Terry on when he needs to adjust prices.
which
Because if we're getting really far behind, like you say, it behoove us to look at that and give him the authority to do that.
And I guess I agree with Mark, I agree with both of you, but are we asking the right question? You know, of Terry, and then how do we, you know, are we charging enough? What do you need? How do we do it? You know, what do you need? And then are, you know, because again, if the money's being left on the table, so to speak, if we're not making that profit and we can increase the prices, then we have to do it. That's just what it is.
Right. So just as a broad statement, the direction has to start here at this table and go towards Terry. We can't have Terry do it and run it back. We're running a business. It needs to start at the top and flow down. So, what's, one of the first questions I asked, well, in here too, what's our advertising budget? When do we, what's our marketing budget for buying apparel? All this stuff, at the end of the day, we own a business. We need to start running it like a business, and it starts here with directive. Terry will do whatever, and like I say, he's doing the best job in the managerial role that he is, but he's not in an owner role. And that's what we're missing.
I guess I'm sort of getting up to speed here on this one, but I mean, I run businesses too. And when you hire somebody to run the business, they have to run it. Has it been that the council has prevented that in the past?
I don't think I would be able to answer that, I guess.
I can't answer that, we're just coming in on.
But that's what I heard you saying. I thought you said that we prevented him from doing whatever is needed to
I
be
don't know
done.
that we've prevented, I don't know, I won't use the word prevent, but I don't know that the directive, the motive, what's the goal? What's
Clear
the mission
guidance.
statement,
Yeah.
what haven't we given him to succeed? I would say that's different than prevent. I would say that, the council hasn't given him all the necessary tools to succeed at the highest level that the pickle could.
What
Well-
tools does he need at this point?
Well, if I may, when you think in regards of a general manager or even somebody higher than that, that has a little bit of additional incentive to see the bottom line be as maximized as possible. What motivation has, and I guess this is also part of the general question to everybody here, have we given Terry any additional motivation to drive that bottom line to be even higher? Because ultimately, from my perspective and from others that I know that have been in this community for a long time, you go there and you go get a discount beer. You get a discount liquor beverage. But it's not as if, and I guess I have to ask generally because, John, you've been here a lot longer than myself, for example, if there's been guidance to try to drive that bottom line higher, to then prepare to budget for the inevitable, which is a new building. Has that been outlined, or is this the time to now start doing that? So Terry's in the same mindset as to what we are all thinking.
So what I'm hearing and then is that he has, no matter what he does, it's the same. In other words, there's no incentive for him to do better.
Well,
Is that what I'm hearing?
more or less, it's not as if,
That's just that'd be one of the tools that hasn't been provided, maybe,
Yeah, and that's a very important tool.
right?
For any business, for the manager, whoever runs the business, we need to have them bring it to us strongly that this is what's needed, because I can't tell him what he has to do.
That's right.
He has to be able to tell me and then persuade me on that through various ways. And then we reward him for any type of savings or profit that increases because of what he's done. I mean, that's the way I'm used to.
Which would then
business.
be kind of in the form of a bonus.
Bonus
right?
incentive.
Yeah, it's a form
Now,
of bonus,
I
yeah.
have to ask,
Which is,
can't happen through a city.
Nope.
So,
can't do
so
that,
on the
huh?
flip side, that then answers your question.
Yeah.
We have to set up certain guidelines, which I would then propose on this front. And I don't mean to spend this much time on the
Yeah.
pickle, but it needs to be talked about. If we go through a comparable price study, perhaps, to try to make the prices at the pickle and perhaps spirits, just to have it on the same level, to be comparable to the area. No different than having multiple comps for your home before you go list it. So it's justification for the value of the home. We then understand where we're gonna have our liquor prices and have that be conducted at a minimum each year, but sometimes even.
So
consideration.
the other thing too would be to look at to see, are we getting the best price from the distributors? Are we getting a comparable competitive
Yeah, I
price? Are
mean,
we
I
getting,
think
are we
they're-
paying a higher price?
They're on top of things like that, but one of the things, the city, just let's take the Winter Jubilee. That's a city function, right? That's been dying for the last 20 years. what have the people on this side of the table tried to do to enhance that for everyone in town? The main beneficiary of that, I would argue, would be the pickle. You know, Terry's been, kind of left to run a function like that on his own without a lot of extra support or drive from this side of the table to make it bigger, make it better. I mean, when I was a little kid, it was massive,
I mean, we're-
That's just an example of the way that I see that, the pickle may not have been, this is just one example on how we could support it better, help drive it, and, that we gotta be aware of.
We're talking a $5.5 million business between two storefronts. Anybody in this room would love to have a business that has that much loyalty, that much customer base, and consistent year-round traffic coming through. I think it's just the perspective, truly just the perspective of looking at it, maybe just a little bit different. And it'll make the decision of how we go about a new building a little bit easier to understand.
Yep.
And I feel like we're getting kind of down that road right now.
Yeah.
But I like what you came up with that as far as like every year, looking at the liquor costs and, mandating that. If we can't give bonuses,
Right.
And that's back to Jenny's point that maybe having PFM or
Is that something?
that if they were, if we were
I
to,
can certainly ask if they would get into that detail. I mean, they go through revenues and expenditures and they do a whole varied analysis. Some of you might be familiar with the cash flow model that's done for the sewer fund. I can certainly ask as far as pricing specific for liquor fund, but I think the idea, similar to what we talked about with parks, is providing resources to Terry and Brian to help them navigate these questions and, the business component and making sure how do we.
well, I think one problem, and this is something else that we can discuss at the closed meeting, but one thing when you talk about benefiting, what's the benefit? If it's gonna be monetary, that's a whole different. Then we're into the union stuff, so.
Well, that
But,
just
but,
goes to
but
Mark's
I mean, like you have a brand new, if your goal is a brand new building. Why? How do I as a city, how do the people in the community fund a brand new building for you? What would that do for you guys? And there's a whole bunch of things it would do. Number one, I mean, it would be a much healthier work environment. B, it would actually bring us into compliance with a number of things that we're not currently in compliance with necessarily. I mean, we're there, but we're getting close. You'd have space, you'd have room, you'd be able to do some newer stuff. So, that'd be,
I can bring back some more information from PFM on that component and.
right. And
See where we go.
I think I would like to hear from, I would like to hear directly from Terry. What do you need?
I was just gonna make a recommendation for this next budget workshop. So Joe's liaison, I'm pro tem on it. Perhaps you all task the liquor committee, which includes Terry, includes Brian, to come up with a, I don't even like to use the blanket term business plan, but to actually come up with, just tasking us to prioritize how to increase the bottom line. And if that means way less of a hands-off approach, which I'm not saying it has been entirely, but being a little bit more engaged in trying to push them into the direction, just with a little bit of accountability or more oversight.
Mentoring.
Again,
Mentoring.
well, I mean, I think Brian does a good job and Terry too, in regards to their specific businesses that they're ultimately running. But perhaps we can try to pull together a full-blown attack plan and strategize, or let's call it a strategic plan for the liquor committee. It's a $5.5 million division of this city, and I think we can really sharpen the pencil quite a bit to be able to make a lot more sense of how we have it going forward.
and
Well,
whatever is set up should be not based upon what city council happens to be. I mean, we all change. We won't be here in
Right.
so many years. It needs to be instituted so that it continues without us
Yeah, absolutely.
mandated.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a yes.
spirits, it looks like basically just finalizing the stuff with Schaefer's and there's no cost involved, so. Okay. Oh, if I can just find mine.
So the council can certainly, if you have any other feedback on levy in general, that would be great. Otherwise, I believe Jesse has some thoughts to share on
Yeah, we have,
bonding bill conversation.
Oh, yeah, D. I'm sorry.
Well, B and C were just kind of combined. I mean, we just sort of, because all of this
right now,
relates,
we
so.
went through the priorities, kind, you know, with what we're seeing here, some of the stuff we have to discuss in closed session, but
So citywide project updates. I'm sorry.
I can do, so we've been doing that in part with some of these topics. I just wanted to, I updated the document, anything in green is what I've updated. I think the only thing that didn't mention was with respect to citywide water. So similar to our approach with our wastewater treatment plant, when you go to build a facility like that, you need to be on the PFA's list. That's the Public Facilities Authority list. They have lists for both wastewater and drinking water. And there is a package that you have to put together, and it's just a process, and Woodseth has done that for us in the past with our sewer. I think we should move forward to take steps to be on that list and to put the information together. So when funding's available, they know about it, they're familiar with things like that. And so I did reach out to Woodseth's funding person, and that would be $5,000 to put all of that together. And then we would be on the state funding list for a water plant. They can just sit there. I think maybe you renew it every year or something like that. It's pretty nominal, but that would be a step moving forward. I'm still working on, of course, implementation, which we'll talk about later this year, but I did want to pose that request to move forward with taking that step.
What about all the backage roads and stuff, though, like go along with this? Cause no sense in doing that without all these other components.
Sure, not that that can't change. So I think getting on the list is the important thing, but we can pause on that if you want, and we can talk about, because that also rolls into the bonding bill conversation.
Mhm.
If that works, so we can just pause on that and then.
let's roll it in with his
Yep.
conversation
Okay.
so we can keep moving along here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Me?
Yes.
Okay. At the tail end of our council retreat, I posed to all of you in regards to a project that has started for just a phantom discussion, then a couple larger conversations, and then some very serious conversations with major stakeholders within the community, even at large. There is significant interest, desired cooperation from not just this community, but city of Brainerd well, not the city, but within Baxter, Brainerd, including Pequot area, for a large hockey arena complex in the city of Nisswa. It's really evolved pretty quick, and it's morphed into a lot of positive interest, but a lot of headwinds just due to the timing nature of this. And unfortunately, with the seeking of public funds, we have the bonding bill due Friday, the 16th. There's just not enough resources to be able to pull together, in my opinion, to do it at this time, as much as I want to, as much as I think it'd be a benefit. I still want to discuss this with you all and pose this. There's been discussions with the landowner, and the site's been identified. The land is south of Holiday Gas Station. There's a significant chunk of land there that being sold at fair market value through the owner's trust. We could acquire said land, and depending on the significant amounts of a private contribution, which has been discussed with a contributor, the demand for a 4-sheet ice hockey arena that could also tandem into a Nisswa community center or a Nisswa rec center for public use from Nisswa taxpayers has been discussed at length, and there is I guess the best way to put it, little opposition from the major stakeholders as I've just outlined. Issues obviously that are gonna run into, in order to being able to push something like this forward is, just trying to understand, who owns and operates. What is the occupancy necessary or minimum threshold to be able to justify annual operating costs, looking at comparable budgets for facilities such as this. But the major occupancy groups such as Brainerd Hockey Association, perhaps the Pequot Hockey Associations, those programs discussing a potential merge, if that was ever to be the case, tandeming with the privately owned Minnesota Hockey Camp, and the owner of that hockey camp also owns a junior team. They would like to entertain having that be their home. Also with the figure skating group out of the Brainerd area, we'd be looking at occupancy just with those handful of groups at just about 70-75% of calendar year. Above and beyond could be events held, concerts, other certain venues, etc.
Two of the things I would like to look at is, do we know, private, public, who's gonna own it, private, public? Or is it gonna be a private, public entity? Two, I mean, you're looking at least 300,000 cost to maintain that annually.
Actually, no. So there's a newly formed, and bear with me on this one, tongue twister. Brainerd Lakes Area New Hockey Rink Committee. So that group, and I was invited to be a participant of that group. They have pulled in together, even just upfront, the annual operating costs for the now called Essentia Sports Complex, but formerly the Civic Center in Brainerd, where the hockey programs are currently out of now. Their anticipated annual operating costs are anywhere between $600,000 and $700,000. But that's just 2 sheets of ice with some pretty outdated equipment that requires some significant fiscal cost to have compensated for the upkeep of it. So ultimately, because of this deadline, I just personally don't see it even going through at this point in time. Keeping an eye on when bonding, future bonding comes through, unless we have a private donor that's willing to go through and perhaps provide the outline of the costs and yes, write a check. This could be a cost anywhere between, including a 10% construction contingency, anywhere between $40 and $50 million. Now, this obviously changes the dynamic of Nisswa, but this is also something that is a huge, in my opinion, and I think it's something for y'all to just to consider through the course of time, as this maybe will come up again, of the impact of what it'll have to our community and in particular the youth. Nisswa, Highway 371 cutting right through it. There's a hockey community here that is incredibly strong. I was not a huge hockey player in organized sports, but I think it's all known to all of us how big it is in this community. And there is significant support and groups and individuals willing to write letters of intent to be able to support this if it was desired to go through. So it's kind of all I have on that. And in regards to that lot, for water, city water, the landowner was also going to consider that being, he was willing to have that be considered a part of that land use for that arena and water. So
this could also be something that if we do on the bonding, to Joe's point, the backage roads could be part of that bonding as well, potentially, if we were to seek a bond of this nature. Absolutely.
You mean including water?
Yeah. Well, the water, I mean.
So you need it to get that lift station 12 in down there to go underneath the highway,
Well, lift
If it's
station,
under-
yeah, lift station 12 would have to.
Be in.
Yeah, you would have to do that. It'd have to be part of the road to get it down to there. You couldn't do it without it. It'd have
Well,
to go hand in hand.
you
even
could,
with-
actually, you could run it down Hazelwood if the backage road was put in.
That's what we're talking about. It'd have to go with the backage.
But
road.
lift station
What would have to go
12,
with the backage road? I'm sorry, I just missed what you were.
lift station 12 will be on the other side of the
The
highway.
Septic and all the infrastructure would have to be put in conjunction with the Backage Road.
Oh, of course.
Of course,
Of
yeah.
course.
Yeah, that's,
Yeah, so.
Doesn't mean
that's
we
what I'm
have an
saying.
active water
project-
system,
A
but we would have.
project like this would have to be done in conjunction with that, even the traffic flow, all of a sudden you have 200 vehicles in that location. MinDOT's not gonna want them to dump out on the highway right there, you know, all that.
well,
stuff.
that's a good thing to push on to Minda. You talk to Rich down there and, you know, again, they have said in the past, if, you know, they've worked with us, if we're not necessarily on their radar, but if we had the land, they would help assist with building it or whatever, so that we can shut down some intersect, yeah. But it's a big picture thing, and I agree, I like the idea. I think there's a huge potential to find an arena where you're gonna have the capacity to do that. You're going up to Hibbing, you're going up to Grand Rapids, you're going to Detroit Lakes.
Bemidji,
You're going to,
Walker.
Well, Hibbing in Virginia, but the Iron Range out, they all have massive rinks and arenas all over the place. Duluth, you know, and then you're down to St. Cloud. So, I mean, it's a real central hub. If you gotta go from International Falls to play a game someplace, the hell of a lot easier to drive to Nisswa than it is to, you know, down to the city, so.
Bill Brainerd, head hockey coach, stated that this would be such an attractive focal point for regional tournaments from all age groups, both boys and girls, that he thought the 75% was a little bit conservative. Because of the sheer amount of additional tournaments, and then spring hockey apparently is becoming a much, or not spring hockey.
The biggest thing I see is if it's a public, if we're owning it and we're manning it and we're maintaining it and we're doing all that. That's a huge undertaking. It would obviously hopefully be an enterprise fund,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah.
and that would take care of itself. But I'm, you know, it'll be, I mean, what can I say? I like the idea.
I mean, I do too. I'm just,
It's
with,
Friday.
with this deadline for the bonding bill, I'm just not comfortable putting
But the next.
my name
That,
on
that-
it.
that would be next year.
We got.
You know, if we were to look at it, and the other thing too is, yeah, I mean, that's a large annual cost, but I mean, the tournaments, you know, you go up north, they've got a hockey tournament every weekend.
Right.
You know, now will that relay down here? You know, that's what I'm wondering. You know, I know it is an exciting hockey area, but is it as enthusiastic? Is it as big as it is once you get north of here to the north and the east?
Yeah, because everyone travels, everyone from here is going up there.
These,
So,
these
We're
hockey,
more hockey basketball here.
Yeah.
Than we are anything else.
yeah, this hockey community that's a part of this committee I just mentioned, they are that confident that this would even just transform what is already established here as a hockey hub for Brainerd Lakes area, that it could be something that'll transform and have an impact on this area for decades to come, in particular the youth. And if it was tandemed in with a community center or community rec center concept, that would just open up a benefit to Nisswa residents for a gym for them to use. We don't have, there's no public facilities for somebody that's a Nisswa resident to be able to work
Now,
out at.
The one question I have, let's say we move ahead with the arena. I'm for it. You know, if we can do this, how would that affect the city park and a hockey, you know, sheet there?
You know,
it would.
Because
change
an
that.
arena would not be open to the public. Most of them are not open to the public.
Or they are for different times or hours.
yeah, like, I mean, I'm familiarized
4
with like
AM, yeah.
open skate night or
Open
something,
skate night,
right?
all that
Right.
stuff.
Now, the city park aside from,
Go ahead.
the city park aside from that, I mean, that's still something that would need to come up, but, I think as time goes on, you know, we'll see what we can do to try to see if this is realistic or not.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And if there's mutual interest, so.
Might want to move the pickle down there. Those people, parents like to drink.
That's just, I'm all for it. I'm saying build a little pickle, you know, with the field, but.
Is there anything that you're gonna be submitting or that we would like to have submitted for the bonding bill coming up on Friday?
Well, the project that if there was an interest, I did ask a question of someone at the league. I'm waiting for an answer, is because there's been an influx of funds, or there will be an influx of funds over a lot of different agencies at the state. And so potentially the backage roads could be better suited to be applied for through one of those funding opportunities where they've put a bunch of money, local road improvement program, things like that. And that would probably be a simpler process for us to go through and apply for that. So I'm hoping to get some guidance from them. But otherwise, that was the project I had in mind. If the council was interested, were one or both of the backage roads to do
I
that.
thought we agreed to look at all of them at the meeting, for you to go ahead and look at all the backage roads.
Both of them?
There's the two, yeah.
I think it's just two, right?
Yeah, there's
Well,
just
yeah,
two.
Both of them.
Yeah.
Okay, well, but consideration for size of request and things like that, you want to put your project in a really advantageous spot. And so that's just the only reason why I suggested one, or, both is fine, but just looking at,
We can't do one without the other, though. It just tangibly doesn't work to get the sewer down there and all that, what the preliminary stuff that WSN, we have to do both at once.
okay, just a suggestion. So you can say, yes, we'd like to do both. I think that would be reasonable. We have estimate numbers, we've got the data. If that's the avenue, that would be the most potential, that has the best potential. I can certainly throw the application in and see where that goes. If the guidance that I get back from the league is that it would be better suited for one of these other programs, do you have a preference either way, as long as they're trying to move forward with getting some kind of state funding for it? I think that's the hope with the MnDOT corridor study. That's not going to determine any funding for the city until 2031. And so that would be the time in which they would talk to us about the whole closing intersections and things like that. So just trying to expedite that, because we know the benefit of those roads.
Yeah, I guess maybe I'm missing something or confused. A, I thought we were already moving ahead with both backage roads. B, 3 years ago, MnDOT sat in here and said, if we close off the Hazelwood Drive intersections and did these close offs, that they would fund the backage roads for me. So I didn't know, as long as we put our name in the hat, they said it was about a 3-year process, and I thought we were already going down that road. And they said that they would, like I say, with their stipulations of closing off these intersections, maybe doing the roundabout past Schaefer's out on 13, doing that stuff, they've already put that criteria together for us.
I believe some of that has changed. I
Mhm.
think it was a very, it was a very advantageous program for the local communities, and they've modified that. So from my understanding and talking with them based on this corridor study, that there won't be funding available for a number of years. And they're very open to the conversation. That's something that they want to work with us on. But no, we have not made any sort of official decision on moving forward with the backage road specific funding.
Well, let's do it now.
Yeah, I think we need to get going on it. I
Yeah.
agree.
Do we even have a route for the other backage road?
Yes,
figured
we
out?
do.
They're
Yeah.
both routes were up and we know where they're going.
North Smiley to 13,
Right.
so coming.
Well, 13 south, basically
well,
coming out
south-
where
south, I know,
Timberwood.
but
I think
Yep.
one of them's still hanging on the wall right there. I think.
Yep,
that-
that's exactly, yep, it's
Yeah.
right there.
They're-
I
Yes.
think they're both
So-
on there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're hanging on the wall right there.
I guess I was.
So I can move forward if you are supportive of that.
Yeah.
I will,
Yes,
Let's
yeah.
go.
I remember that they never guaranteed that it would happen, but
Right.
but by closing those intersections off, you have a much better chance of getting funding for that.
yes.
But I agree, we need to move as quickly as we can on something like that. I would
Right.
really like to get that in.
No backage roads, no arena.
I will likely need
That's not true either.
some sort of resolution that I would have the mayor sign for the submittal. I will send it to you before I submit, but just so you know, it would be that the council. So if I can have a motion that would support applying for the 2024 bonding bill.
I so
for
move.
the-
I would make the motion.
Mhm.
Second.
Mark made it, Joe second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Thank you.
What do you think of that?
And then one last thing on
That'll
this,
work for
so before we move to closed session, in regards to city water, I've read a pretty alarming report in regards to studies of aquifers in rural towns. And how it's been unmonitored since America was established. I am interested to see if you are all opposed to exploring what that would cost, what that would look like. Perhaps, if it comes back and it states that our system or our natural aquifer is that stressed, would that then perhaps further a case for $10 to $40 million for city water? I only bring that up because since I've been here, I think we've applied twice now to Staver's request for federal funding. And you've asked for water, I think both times, Jenny, on behalf of the city, and they've just shot us down. What's gonna ever change for us to be able to get that funding based off the demographics and our tax base, right?
Right.
Would something like that, if it came back, and I pray it doesn't, but it's something just to understand, if it was stressed. And I don't even know what it would look like. I have observed a few. Just on a general sense. Thoughts?
Well, I think we need to look at it before we, yeah, I mean, I have no issue with looking at it, but what is that gonna, what does that entail? We're just
I'm
looking
not exactly sure,
So-
but is that something that is worth going down before we attempt to
I
get
can
10 to
ask-
40 million again?
I can ask Woodseth. If they've been involved with something like that or would have point us in the right direction for resources to have
We
that
have asked
conversation.
them in the past, they were in the process of actually working on that, but then they were gonna look at it, and then
Yeah.
we got like 1,800 things on our plate, and so we tabled that one and then had them do the other ones, and the trail is one, the
Roundabout.
roundabout is another one. Those were things that, really weren't.
What would we specifically ask them for?
It's a study for the water system, where, I mean, the footprint and some
Where
of
would it
that.
go? What would that entail?
And that was in part because typically we don't qualify for grants or other things, and it's difficult for us to get money. And so to get on this list, we don't have to do that today. That's just, I think that's a direction we'll consider in the future, but that gives us basically very, very low interest on a loan to build the system or components of it. So if we were able to get funding for half of it, let's say, we had to, get a loan for the rest, that would be the authority that we would do it under. So.
Well, being on the list would be better sooner than later.
Yes, I don't think for this calendar year, we're in a rush, so we can do it this calendar, or we can work on some of these details and then make sure that that's the right route. That was a challenge for the sewer. We didn't qualify for anything else, so that's how we had to do that. But yes, we can circle back with some more details on the water, and I can ask that question.
Okay. We're gonna need a recommendation to move to closed session. Do we want to take a 5-minute break, guys?
Yeah.
Yes, but if I can have someone read this motion.
Yeah.
Please, and then yes, we'll take a 5.
Make a motion that we go into closed session.
Pursuant to Minnesota State
Pursuant to
Statute
Minnesota-
13B.03
You can read the whole thing,
regarding
please.
union negotiations. I'll
Thank you.
second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we are now in closed session. You need to take a break, guys.